Welcome back to Michael, the #1 daytime talk show of all the Seven Kingdoms. Today, we and our good friends at WDL Westeros DNA Labs have the paternity test results for Jaime, Cersei, and Tyrion. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get these results out and shed some light on this mystery. Aerys II Targaryen. When it comes to little Tyrion and the twins, Jaime and Cersei, you are not the father and are the father. Wait, okay. This doesn't make any sense. Who's in charge of these results? This doesn't make any sense. Hey, Tywin, sit down. You said, don't you point that thing at me. You sit down, okay? No, that's not cool. We will get this figured out, okay? But we're going to take a quick commercial break and have a word from our sponsors while we try to get this figured out, guys. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. We are here live on location in beautiful Casterly Rock in the Westerlands, seat of House Lannister. What better place to join you today to talk about Tyrion, Cersei, and Jaime Lannister? Or is it Targaryen? We will find out today. Now first, when discussing whether or not Aerys II Targaryen is the father of either Jaime, Cersei, Tyrion, all of them, none of them, we have to determine whether or not there is evidence of a relationship. You can't have a baby without some sort of relationship. I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's how it happens. So we look to the story here to see if there is some sort of relationship between the two. And the example I'm going to talk about is in A Dance with Dragons, where Sir Barristan the Bold, rest in peace, show Barristan, is speaking with Daenerys Targaryen. And Dany is asking him about her father and mother's relationship. Dany says, "Was there some woman Aerys loved better than his queen?" Barristan the Bold, my man, says, "Not loved. Mayhaps wanted is a better word. As a youth, he was much taken with Joanna. When she and Tywin wed, your father drank too much wine at the feast, and was heard to say that it was a great pity that the lord's right to the first night had been abolished. A drunken jape no more, but Tywin Lannister was not a man to forget such words, or the liberties your father took during the bedding." Right there we have our precedent for a relationship. Whether this relationship was consensual, whether it was a little less than consensual, we don't know, but we do know there is the desire of Aerys II for Joanna Lannister. So right now, we've got that on the way, so it is a possibility. First, let's talk about Tyrion. One of the main pros in the argument for Tyrion being a Targaryen is the dragon dreams. Dragon dreams are a hallmark for Targaryen lineage throughout this entire world. We're told that Dany, Daemon Blackfyre, Daeron Targaryen, Maester Aemon, and his brothers all had these dragon dreams. In the first book, A Game of Thrones, Tyrion tells Jon Snow that he himself has had these dragon dreams, and actually accuses Jon Snow of having the same dreams, which we all know Jon Snow is a Targaryen. So if it were that Tyrion had these dreams, he would be the only non-Targaryen in this entire story that has had dragon dreams. And when talking to Jon, the two have a conversation about this on the wall. Jon says, "What are you reading?" And Tyrion says, "What are you reading about?" "Dragons," Tyrion told him. "What good is that? There are no more dragons." Tyrion tells him that, yeah, even a stunted, twisted, ugly little boy can look down upon the world when seated on a dragon's back. Tyrion tells Jon, I used to start fires in the bowels of Casterly Rock and pretend that the flames were burning my sister and sometimes my father, or something along those lines. So then finally Tyrion ends this by looking at Jon and saying, don't look at me that way, bastard. I know your secret. You've dreamed the same kind of dreams. Jon Snow said, horrified, I wouldn't, no. And Tyrion, never? And raised an eyebrow. He gave him the people's eyebrow. Goes something like that. So right there, we have evidence that Tyrion could possibly be a Targaryen due to these dragon dreams that no other bloodline has experienced in these stories. Reason number 2 Tyrion could possibly be a Targaryen is the dragon has 3 heads prophecy. In Dany's vision of the House of the Undying, she's given a vague vision from her brother Rhaegar and a prophecy that the dragon must have 3 heads. Many people have interpreted this prophecy to mean that there are 3 surviving Targaryens, which would be Dany, Jon Snow, and a third. Another person who could possibly be this third head of the dragon in the books is young Griff or Aegon VI. But most people do not believe he is actually a Targaryen. They believe that he is possibly a Blackfyre being masqueraded as a Targaryen, possibly a Mummer's dragon from Varys and Illyrio. So if Aegon VI is not the third head of the dragon, Tyrion is definitely a candidate to fill that role. However, there are alternate interpretations of this prophecy. For example, Maester Aemon tells Dany, or talks about Dany to Sam and says, the dragon must have 3 heads, but I, too old to be one, I should be with her, showing her the way, but my body has betrayed me. Maester Aemon considered it a possibility that he could have been one of the heads of the dragon, but discounted himself due to his age. This could lead us to believe that the prophecy doesn't necessarily mean the only 3 surviving Targaryens, but something entirely different, because Maester Aemon only knew of himself and Dany as being Targaryens at the time, so if he thought there had to be 3, who else was he thinking of? The next little piece of evidence here I'm going to talk about that might point to Tyrion's Targaryen lineage is Tywin Lannister's quote of, "You're no son of mine." When Tyrion is released from the Black Cells, he goes and kills Tywin with a crossbow, and those are his famous last words. Some have interpreted this to mean that Tywin knew all along that Tyrion was not his biological son, and was admitting this in his final, last dying breath. There are basically 2 sides to this here. One side supports the argument that Tywin wasn't telling the truth, and that he was just getting one last dig in on Tyrion before he died, and that Tywin would never have raised a child produced by Aerys II. Tywin tells Tyrion himself he thought of drowning him, and if he actually knew Tyrion was not his son, would have no reservations in killing him. That's the first argument. The opposing side to this says that Tywin Lannister, who is all about perception and image, could not stand being laughed at or ridiculed, would definitely not bring any attention to a situation like this. What would be more shaming to him than having a dwarf son? And that would be having the love of his life raped and impregnated and eventually killed by his rival Aerys II, a man who he hated. Tywin, being the calculating man that he is, I think would much rather raise Tyrion as his own, even if he did know that he was not his son. And the reason is just to avoid the ridicule and the laughter that would have risen if the entire realm were to know that he had been cuckolded. If he were to have killed Tyrion because he was the Mad King's bastard, the entire country would have known what had happened. There would have been no doubt in the minds of his supporters and his rivals that the Mad King had had his way with Tywin's wife and brought shame to House Lannister and Tywin himself. This could be one of the main driving forces behind Tywin's hatred for Tyrion. If Tyrion is the son of the Mad King, it is a constant reminder to Tywin of the man he hated and the man who killed his wife. It could be a much deeper hatred than just the shame of having a dwarf son. More along these lines here, you have the quote from Tywin Lannister in A Storm of Swords, where he tells Tyrion, "Men's laws give you the right to bear my name and display my colors, since I cannot prove that you are not mine." Just a little bit more to think about on the whole idea of if Tywin knew, if it is possible, if he was a Targaryen, if Tywin knew this whole time. Something to think about there. Another reason Tyrion could possibly be a Targaryen, and this is of course a show-only reason, is that Dany's dragons do not eat him. When Tyrion releases the dragons from the dragon pit in Meereen, they don't harm him, they don't roast him alive, they don't eat him. You know, in the books, when Quentyn Martell tries to do the same thing, they lit up his party, his entire party, literally. They ate him, or no, they didn't eat Quentyn, but they burnt them alive. And there's speculation that Targaryen blood helps in relationships with dragons. So it could be a possibility that Tyrion has Targaryen blood, and that is the reason the dragons took a liking to him. Of course, Quentyn Martell has a little bit of Targaryen blood through Daenerys, the original, but it could possibly be that he didn't have enough. Or it could be possible that he didn't even die and that George R. R. Martin pulled a fake out on us. And that's, of course, if you subscribe to the theory that Quentyn Martell is still alive. It's a good theory. Another reason this is possible that Tyrion could possibly be a Targaryen is that it works time frame wise. This may be news to some, but as I said before, in order for one person to impregnate another person, they have to be around that person, give or take 9 months before the birth. The only way Aerys II could be Tyrion's father is if he and Joanna were in the same location for that event to occur. A World of Ice and Fire tells us that at the Great Anniversary Tournament of 272 AC, held to commemorate Aerys II's 10th year on the throne, Joanna Lannister brought her 6-year-old twins, Jaime and Cersei, from Casterly Rock to present them to the court. The king, very much in his cups, asked her if giving suck to them had ruined your breasts, which were so high and proud. The question greatly amused Lord Tywin's rivals, but who were always pleased to see the hand slighted or made mock of. But Lady Joanna was humiliated. Tywin Lannister attempted to return his chain of office the next morning, but the king refused to accept his resignation. Many people have speculated that something else may have happened here. Something a little bit deeper than just a drunken jape about Joanna Lannister's breasts. Some people think this could be a time where he went a little bit further than that, and that was really what enraged Tywin and not just an offhanded comment. And if that did happen, possibly could have been the birth or the conception of Tyrion. But whatever happened, time frame wise, Joanna was around King Aerys in a timeline that could have produced the birth of Tyrion. Another thing to think about in all this is that 2 Targaryens we know of, Jon and Dany, both killed their mothers in childbirth. So it would be only fitting, possibly, if Tyrion was a Targaryen, you have three of the main characters, three being Targaryens. I'm not saying he is or isn't at this point. This is just the evidence. Three Targaryens, all three killing their mothers. Definitely something interesting to think about. The last item I want to discuss that could possibly be evidence of a Tyrion Targaryen is Tyrion's disfigurement. Okay, could the physical deformities displayed by Tyrion be the results of an unsuccessful abortion? If Joanna Lannister knew that she was pregnant by King Aerys II and knew in her mind, because the seed is strong, that she could not pass Tyrion off as Tywin's son, what would she do? We know that there are certain concoctions and certain concoctions and mixtures in Westeros that can abort a pregnancy and stop a woman from conceiving, some sort of birth control type mechanism. But we don't know how these chemicals work or what the outcome exactly is after they're administered. Could they fail sometimes? Could they cause physical deformities and complications such as dwarfism, like that's seen in Tyrion? This is only speculation, but it would be interesting to see if this is one of the reasons why Tyrion was born the way he is. And also, could it have led to Joanna's death during childbirth? This is pure speculation. There's no evidence in the series that these birth control concoctions and abortion chemicals do anything like this, but it definitely could be a possibility. Okay, now let's discuss some of the evidence that points to the conclusion that Tyrion is, in fact, not a Targaryen. First off, I want to talk about the death of Dany's dragon, Viserion. If you're on board with the whole the dragon has three heads prophecy being three dragon riders, the show death and turning of Viserion into a White Walker dragon / ice dragon could throw a major wrench into this whole line of thought. Of course, the show could actually just be dropping this whole prophecy altogether. They've not mentioned it. They could just be leaving it out. They could be leaving the entire plot line, if it's real, of Tyrion being a dragon rider out. It could not even exist on the show. Of course, that's not to say that it will not continue or exist in the books. The books could be totally different on this regard. In the books, if Tyrion turns out to be a Targaryen, he could still ride Viserion. And the dragon could not even die at all in the series. You know, if the wall comes down in the books due to an ice dragon by the White Walkers, there is precedence and foreshadowing for an actual natural ice dragon to be used, not a white dragon or an undead dragon. The World of Ice and Fire specifically talks about the legends and the reports of ice dragons north of the wall. And George R.R. Martin himself wrote the children's book, The Ice Dragon, which is a literal ice dragon, not an undead White Walker dragon. So there is evidence that the White Walkers could do the exact same thing they do in the show, but with a real ice dragon in the books. But if the books continue as the show and Viserion dies, it could really put a damper on the whole Tyrion is a Targaryen deal, where Tyrion would not have a dragon to ride, possibly the three heads of the dragon would mean something differently, maybe. Okay, one of the major reasons in this story that points to Tyrion not being a Targaryen is the storytelling style of George R.R. Martin. George R.R. Martin writes about the human struggle in a part fantasy, part magical, part medieval world. The story has magical elements, but the real story in play is the conflict within the human heart, the struggle within oneself to prosper, and the decisions you have to make in order to make that happen, and then the consequences that come with those decisions. If Tyrion turned out to be the only trueborn son of Tywin Lannister, it would fit perfectly in George's whole theme of struggle and decisions. Tyrion is pragmatic, he's calculating, and he is even ruthless at some times when it comes to defending his family and those he loves. Despite the abuse of Cersei and Tywin, he stays loyal and fights for them with everything he has, even though he receives little credit. He shares these personality traits with Tywin. And besides that, they both have a propensity for whores. Tywin was said to have snuck women in and out of the Red Keep while he worked as Hand of the King using the secret tunnels. And we know that Tyrion did the exact same thing, not only in the Red Keep with Shae, but also at Casterly Rock. And I think it would fit perfectly with this story if the son, who is a carbon copy of his father in everything but physical appearance, turns out to be the only one who could pass on the Lannister name and pass on the legacy that Tywin Lannister has spent so much time trying to build. The person he hated, the person he reviled and tried to kill, becoming the only one to pass on his legacy is sort of a poetic justice that really fits within the whole storyline of A Song of Ice and Fire. I think that makes much more sense than Tyrion, his struggle not mattering. If it turned out that Tyrion wasn't a Lannister, that he was truly the Mad King's son, then all the pain and all the ridicule and the ostracizement that he faced from Tywin would be meaningless, because it wouldn't make sense then. It would be, of course he hated me. I was the Mad King's son and he knew. Or of course he hated me. He never could develop that sort of love for me because I wasn't his son. But it is much more tragic and emotional if it comes to light that Tyrion really is Tywin's son, and he chose to treat him that way and to hate him like that because of just his physical appearance. All right, now let's talk about Jaime and Cersei here, and we're going to group these two together. They are twins. I'm not going to get into any of this whole Jaime, twins can have different fathers thing. That is a little bit over what we're talking about here. So just to get into it first, Jaime has a conversation with his aunt that is very interesting. She tells him that Jaime is not Tywin's son and that Tyrion's Tywin's only son. She says, "Jaime," she said, tugging on his ear. "Sweetling, I have known you since you were a babe at Joanna's breast. You smile like Geryon and fight like Tig, and there is some Kevin in you, else you would not wear that cloak. But Tyrion is Tywin's son, not you. I said so once to your father's face, and he would not speak to me for half a year." Now, of course, she's not being literal here. She's explaining to Jaime that he shares no personality traits with Tywin. They are nothing alike, and that Tyrion, despite the fact that Tywin does not want to hear it, is a carbon copy of Tywin. They have the exact same personality traits. Now, despite the fact that she is not literally telling Jaime he's not Tywin's biological son, I think this is a foreshadowing, definitely by George R.R. Martin, to put this idea in play, and so it can be watered later on in the series, which we will see that when we talk about Jaime a little more. But this was the seed. This is the beginning. This is when it's planted, and it's going to be watered by George, the master gardener, later on. I think it's interesting, too, that Jaime and Tyrion, if this is true, if Jaime is a Targaryen, that Jaime and Tyrion would have both killed their fathers. The story, I think, would take on a little bit deeper meaning especially when Tyrion and Jaime are sitting in the black cells and joking about the Kingslayer brothers, when in fact they're actually the Kinslayer brothers, or the Father Slayers, or the Dad Slayers, or Patricide, Herbicide, Regicide. They had a lot of names for those. Now, in talking about Cersei, there are a lot of reasons and pros in the slot for Cersei and Jaime being Targaryens that relate only to Cersei, especially her similarities with Mad King Aerys II. Cersei and Mad King Aerys have an almost sexual and lustful desire for wildfire. Mad King Aerys was obsessed with wildfire, and it is noted by Jaime Lannister himself that after Aerys burned one of his hands of the king with wildfire, he visited Queen Rhaella that night and basically raped her because he became insatiable with lust and desire after watching a man be roasted to death by wildfire. Now, this exact behavior has been shown by Cersei in the books and the show. In the books, Jaime watches Cersei burn down the Tower of the Hand with wildfire. And as he's watching her, we have this little quote here from the book. She stood with one hand on her breast, her lips parted, her green eyes shining. She is crying, Jaime realized. But whether it was from grief or ecstasy, he could not have said. The sight had filled him with disquiet, reminding him of Aerys Targaryen and the way a burning would arouse him. Now, in the show, we see a similar scene play out, though it is not with wildfire, the end result is the same. When Cersei poisons one of the sand snakes, whichever one that was, in front of Ellaria, she immediately goes and finds Jaime and forces herself on him, despite his many protests. Though it's not a wildfire death, it's the same behavior displayed by Aerys II. They both become wild with lust after vanquishing and murdering their enemies. Cersei also shares the same paranoia with Aerys II, her possible father, a trait that ultimately led to his downfall and has led to Cersei's downfall. The Mad King became increasingly paranoid after the defiance of Duskendale, where House Darkland invited the Mad King over for dinner and a little bit of a chat, and then kidnapped him. So that didn't go over very well. He pretty much lost it after that. He was on a little bit of shaky ground before that, but after spending weeks in the dungeon and possibly getting molested, he cracked and was only saved where Barristan Selmy pulled a Rambo and infiltrated the castle and rescued him. Cersei has displayed these same traits over the course of the series. Throughout her life, she's been suspicious of Tyrion due to the prophecy of Maggie the Frog, which said that all three of her children would die, I don't know if it actually says three, but all of her children would die, and that after that, the Valancourt, little brother, would wrap his hands around her pale neck and choke her out. She has always interpreted this to mean that Tyrion would kill her. And after the death of Joffrey and Tywin, her paranoia of Tyrion and everybody other than Jaime increases dramatically. This is what led her to burn down the Tower of the Hand in the first place, because she thinks that Tyrion is going to be jumping out of the curtains or hiding under her bed or something and come out and get her. This also causes her to be paranoid of the Tyrells and hatch her little scheme to take down the Tyrells with the Warrior Sons and the Stars, whatever the other group was called, and the Seven Stars, maybe. I can't remember their name. But and giving the High Sparrow power, which leads to her imprisonment and Walk of Shame. So you have two parallels there of both rulers losing their power and being brought down due to their paranoia. Now, Jaime has a dream during a feast for crows that is very important to this whole argument. He has a dream of a woman, a blonde woman, who turns out to be his mother. And she comes to him and says, "Will you forget your own Lord Father too? I wonder if you ever knew him, truly." Her eyes were green, her hair spun gold. He could not tell how old she was, 15, he thought, or 50. She climbed the steps to stand above the bier. He could never abide being laughed at. That was the thing he hated the most. "This is a dream." "Is it?" She smiled sadly. "Count your hands, child." One. One hand, clasped tight around the sword hilt. Only one. "In my dreams, I always have two hands." He raised his right arm and stared uncomprehending at the ugliness of his stump. We all dream of things we cannot have. Tywin dreamed that his son would be a great knight and that his daughter would be queen. He dreamed that they would be so strong and brave and beautiful that no one would ever laugh at them. "I am a knight," he told her, "and Cersei is a queen." A tear rolled down her cheek. The woman raised her hood and turned her back on him. Jaime called after her, but already she was moving away, her skirt whispering lullabies as it brushed across the floor. "Don't leave me," he wanted to call, but of course, she'd left them long ago. Now, like I said, this person is Joanna Lannister, Jaime's and Cersei and Tyrion's mother. Now, second, this dream is very suspicious to whether or not it's actually a real dream, or if it's something more than that, if it's a vision, because specifically she tells Jaime, in your dreams, you dream of two hands. You don't dream of having this stump. So she's telling him right there, this is something more than just a regular dream. And the biggest, most important part of this is that she tells him, everyone dreams of things we cannot have. Jaime dreams of that hand being back. She tells him Tywin dreamt of a daughter that would be queen and a son who would be a great knight. And he basically thinks that doesn't make sense because Cersei is queen and he is a great knight. And that's when the tear rolls down her face. I think this scene right here is the biggest piece of evidence of the series that Jaime and Cersei are not Tywin's children. Joanna tells Jaime specifically, we dream of things we cannot have, and tells him exactly what Tywin dreamt of. A daughter that would be queen and a son that would be a great knight. She would not say this if Tywin had those things, because we dream of things we cannot have. Tywin cannot have a son that is a great knight because Tyrion cannot be a knight due to his physical limitations. One other aspect of this vision that is very interesting is the fact that when she first mentions this to him, she says, "Would you forget your Lord Father too? I wonder if you ever knew him truly." Then when she talks about what Tywin dreamt of, she calls him Tywin instead of your father or your Lord Father. I think it's very plausible that when she says, "Would you forget your Lord Father? Did you ever know him truly?" she is talking about Aerys II, because Jaime never truly knew his father. She then says he could never abide being laughed at. That's what he hated the most. And this fits for both Aerys II and Tywin. They both despise being joked about. Aerys II went so far as to cut out the tongue of Sir Ilan Payne when he joked that Tywin Lannister was the true power of the Seven Kingdoms. Another piece of evidence that could point to Jaime and Cersei being Targaryens is their incest. Incest has been practiced by Targaryens for centuries. This has been said to be the cause of the madness that is so prevalent in the house. Many characters have joked in this series that when the gods made a Targaryen, they would flip a coin to determine whether they would go crazy or not. It's so prevalent that this is due to the genetic problems that arise from inbreeding. And the Targaryens were notorious for this. And it's interesting to think that could the inbreeding and incest that has been caused or that the Targaryens have practiced actually be an inherited trait along with the madness? Could it be that years of these inbreeding, incestuous practices have instilled that in their genetics and that they pass down the desire to inbreed? And that it could possibly not be so much to keep the bloodline pure, but that it is an innate desire that this bloodline has. That would make much more sense in the terms of Cersei and Jaime having this desire for incest, that it was something passed on from their ancestors. No other bloodline in the series seems to have this issue, despite all the problems, genetically speaking, that are caused from inbreeding. The Targaryens continued year after year to practice it. So it makes sense to me that that possibly could not be by choice, but by genetically passed down desires. And definitely no other family has had the desire of incest like the Targaryens, so it would make sense if Cersei and Jaime were Targaryens due to their incestuous behavior. All right, let's go ahead and talk about reasons against Jaime and Cersei being Targaryens. First of all, the official time frame does not work for this to happen. It has been, in the World of Ice and Fire, they say it has been reliably reported, however, that King Aerys took unwanted liberties with the Lady Joanna's person during her bedding ceremony to Tywin's displeasure. Not long thereafter, Queen Rhaella dismissed Joanna Lannister from her service. No reason for this was ever given, but Lady Joanna departed at once for Casterly Rock and seldom visited King's Landing thereafter. Cersei and Jaime were born 3 years after this event. Now, one thing we need to remember about this official timeline from A World of Ice and Fire. This was given by Maester Yandel in a book form to Tommen, okay? This would not give any embarrassing information about Tywin or Joanna Lannister. Embarrassing enough about a relationship with King Aerys. And it especially would not give any supporting details to corroborate Cersei Lannister being an illegitimate child, okay? This would not be in the official timeline. So it would make sense that all the time frame information would not line up with something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean there's something there that we're not seeing. It just means that you have to take what The World of Ice and Fire says, storyline-wise, with a grain of salt, because it is written in the point of view to be received by King Tommen, and would not have information that would be damaging to his family. Also, the wording of this, it says that she seldom visited King's Landing. This does not prove 100% that she was not around the Mad King any time between there to conceive Jaime and Cersei. This just makes it less likely because we don't hear about it. It would make you wonder if she did visit it, would it be recorded? Where's that information? But it does not prove that she did or didn't. Also, a piece of evidence against Jaime and Cersei being Targaryens would be the dragon has 3 heads prophecy. If this prophecy is to be interpreted there are 3 remaining Targaryens, 3 dragon riders, then Jaime and Cersei cannot be Targaryens because in that case the dragon would have 4 heads. And that wouldn't make any sense. You'd have 3 of them on a dragon. You know, Jaime and Cersei, do they take turns riding the dragon? Does one of them just sit over in the corner and hang out? Just doesn't work. But there are many views of this prophecy. So in the prophecy itself does not necessarily mean they're not Targaryens because there are 2 of them. It just means that if the correct interpretation is 3 remaining Targaryens, 3 dragon riders, and only that, Cersei and Jaime can therefore not be Targaryens. Now that we've looked at all the evidence, I'm going to give you my take on Lannister Targaryens. First and foremost, on Tyrion. I think that Aerys II is not Tyrion's father. I believe that Tywin Lannister is Tyrion's father and that Tyrion is Tywin Lannister's one and only son. Thus, Jaime and Cersei, I believe, are the children of Mad King Aerys II. I think the Feast for Crows dream is just too much to ignore. I don't see any other way around that. I don't see how you could interpret that Feast for Crows dream meaning anything else but that Tywin wanted a son that was a knight and a daughter to be queen, and he never got those things because his only son is a dwarf. I don't see any other interpretation for that. I know some people have said that, oh, she's meaning that they were laughed at, but that's not the important part of that they could be laughed at. Tywin hated being laughed at, yes, but he didn't dream of children that wouldn't be laughed at. He dreamt of children that would be queen and would be a knight. And also, the similarities between Cersei and Mad King Aerys are just mirror images of each other. And it makes so much sense, given the prophecy, vision, whatever, in A Feast for Crows, and the behavior of Cersei, that those 2 would be Targaryens, especially over Tyrion. I know Tyrion being a Targaryen is a popular theory, but I just think it is such a better story if Tyrion is Tywin's only son. I think it's a much more tragic story in that regard, that the only son he had was treated like garbage when the son, the golden son, was not even his. So let me know what you think. Do you think Tyrion, Jaime, or Cersei, either one, could be Targaryens? Do you think none are Targaryens? Maybe you think all of them are Targaryens. Go ahead and comment in the comments here. We'll talk about it, have a little discussion. If you like this video, please like the video itself. Subscribe. I hope to have more videos here soon. And if you like what I do, please subscribe here, leave some comments. Everything I just said, I repeated it again. So think about that. And until next time, I will see you guys later.